Thank you for joining me, Scott Ryan. I'm just looking at this quote from this blog from University of Pennsylvania professor of religious studies. Her name's Althea Butler, and she says in a blog, a rant that she's written in the past couple days, that God is a white racist God with a problem, who is carrying a gun and stalking young black men. She says God ain't good all the time. In fact, sometimes God is not for us. It's amazing when you look at these outrageous Ivy League, so-called Ivy League universities. It's the quintessential bubble. I mean, forget about certain stocks. Forget about Tesla Motors. Forget about the U.S. Treasury. Well, the U.S. Treasury bond, that'll give it a run for its money. But the bond market with these ridiculous yields, these are bubbles that we talk about in the financial world every day, and I write about them frequently. But the Ivy League degree, this University of Pennsylvania, the fact that they employ people like in Harvard and Princeton, they all do. These absurd idiots with no credentials. It totally devalues anything that would indicate prestige. I mean, these people, the people who are responsible, the fiduciaries over these universities, should be run out of town on a rail. They are desecrating. They have already desecrated. This is the defining example of the emperor has no clothes. The old story. I mean, as long as everybody's pretending that the emperor has this magnificent suit, then basically it's a self-fulfilling prophecy until somebody has the courage, until at some point the bubble breaks and everybody realizes the degrees being printed out from these bastions of Marxism and propaganda and hate, the indoctrination. It is the ultimate scam of the century. I mean, the hundreds of thousands of dollars paid for by credulous parents and God knows who else for these pieces of paper that are really worthy of toilet paper at best. The bubble's got to come crumbling down. I mean, you cannot keep teaching such fallacies, such absurdities, and allowing this to have your name attached to it. I mean, anybody associated with hiring this idiot should be fired, and much more. And the same with the rest of the Ivy League schools. I mean, they all have them, and it's the biggest racket going. These are worthless pieces of paper. But this lady's going on, and I use that term lady loosely. I mean, it's really sad. She's saying, I know that this American God ain't my God. And it's kind of like that Black Panther movement, or back in the days where the Nation of Islam was founded, and Malcolm X and Muhammad Ali denouncing the God of Israel, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Jesus Christ, as though they knew him as their Savior, and they denounced him because he's the white man's God. Now, forget about the fact that God, throughout Israel's history, has called them the apple of his eye, has an eternal covenant with them, but because he loves them, has actually given them over to captivity and slavery. God's own chosen. But Althea, she went to Fuller Theological Seminary in Vanderbilt. She probably doesn't know that. Never would occur to her that in this lifetime, sometimes things happen in this sinful world, and sometimes injustice happens. Not that the Trevon case is injustice, because this Zimmerman trial was, he was tried by his peers, but as though everything in life is going to go smoothly, you're guaranteed that. Or else, God, you're not my God anymore because of this. And who is? So they, like with Muhammad Ali and many of the Nation of Islam, they say, we're denouncing everything that we believe in now because he's the God of the white man. So now we're turning back to our heritage, and we're Muslims. The Nation of Islam. Muhammad is our God. not that white man's God. But if they had any, like her degrees from Vanderbilt and Fuller, but if they actually had a legitimate education instead of being indoctrinated, they would see the incredible irony in the fact that they're denouncing Jesus Christ now, who's basically said, "Behold, I stand at the door and knock, and if anyone will come in, if anyone will open the door, I will come into him and dine with him, and he with me." That he cannot be forced upon anyone, because salvation is a gift to all. The founding documents that upon which that check that Martin Luther King said that he was there to cash. Martin Luther King did not vilify the Constitution of the United States. He praised it. And many of our founding fathers who wrote it were vehemently anti-slavery. It existed from the British. But they're denouncing that God and his son Jesus Christ, upon which this nation was founded. And they're complaining about how bad it is here in the United States being black and living under this form of government that we live in this economic system that allows somebody like this cretin to have probably a six-figure job for indoctrinating people and spreading hate. She's denouncing it because the God and the nation, because it would be so much better if she was in Africa, where they still have slavery. If they didn't have the white man's God, if she was in her homeland worshiping her own heritage, her own nation's God, which the irony is that Islam is in Africa because Muhammad built the religion from the time before he conquered Medina. They waited on the outskirts and plundered caravans, murdered people, robbed them, raped them, took their money, and built up the following until they could go and conquer Medina. And then they went from nation to nation, repeating that formula for success into Africa, going into countries brutally. And you could read the stories as they happen today, where the Muslims come in there and they give you a choice. And your choice is, if you're a man, convert to Islam or die, and they'll behead you. And if you're a woman or a child, they'll say convert to Islam or we won't kill you, and our benevolence will castrate you and make slaves of you. And it perpetuates today. And that is forget the white man's God in America, this hellish place where I live and suffer every day, where I'm such a victim while I'm giving these interviews on CNN and MSNBC every night, getting paid six figures from an Ivy League racket like University of Pennsylvania or Harvard, for that horrible thing. If I could just go back to the religion of my fathers, who were made that religion because if they didn't, they would be killed. That is what this ignorant cretin is claiming. I guess the inference is because America, the quote, "I know this American God ain't my God." Well, we've seen this pattern. This is what the whole Louis Farrakhan freak show is about, that bastardized version of Islam. And I say bastardized because, believe me, the Muslims in Saudi Arabia look down upon the blacks, the Africans. They're not even legitimate to them. They don't. The Nation of Islam is a cult to them. These are very racist people. Not only that, but of course sexist and beat women and basically treat them like dung and cattle, and can basically kill them if they want to without any legal animate version. And they kill homosexuals and all that. But this is the religion that Louis Farrakhan and Muhammad Ali and all these educated sages want to embrace instead of that white man's religion. Think about it. You want to talk about the ultimate racket. And then questioning this jury. The jury, all right, suddenly, despite the fact that Zimmerman was he was tried by an impartial jury. These women, 6 women, I believe, suddenly their verdict is tainted, and this is racist because they didn't like the verdict. Forget about, okay, when you're charging somebody for murder, prosecuting, you have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. That's all. And it was okay when O.J. was acquitted, despite the empirical evidence and the circumstantial evidence pointing overwhelmingly that this man killed Simpson and Goldman, I believe his name was. And OJ even admitted it basically after the fact in a book that he wrote, If I Did It, which he was basically gloating. That was okay, though, because the glove don't fit, you must acquit. That's all it took. So, okay, that's one thing. So we all knew, the nation knew, and I think even most black Americans who supported this verdict knew that he did do it, but this was some sort of revenge against the white man, kind of like Obama's election. Obama was, being the OJ president. It's the same principle. No matter how much he screws up this nation, terrorizes it, and destroys it, it's okay because we deserve it. But OJ getting off for killing 2 people is one thing, because no matter what, even if he was brought to justice, that won't bring the 2 people back. Their rights have been ultimately infringed permanently, okay? So, guilty or not guilty, sometime, if you believe in God, OJ will pay, if not in this life, in the next life, in eternity. But, think about what they're asking in the latter case. We're talking about Zimmerman, tried by a jury, and they want, just as some sort of placation, this man to go to prison for the rest of his life, even though he was found innocent. We're talking about taking away this man's rights forever and putting him in a prison with some bubba or whatever. That's an entirely different matter. But the verdict was okay with OJ. With this guy, send Zimmerman to prison for the rest of his life. It doesn't matter if he was innocent. We need to be pacified. It's a sick world. It's coming apart. It's coming apart at the hinges. You can see it as this so-called president of the United States, this imposter, and all the people in our government that he's paying to foment the discord, paying with our tax dollars to go and instigate protests like what we're seeing. Sabotage. These are sick times, and there's not much we can do for this nation, but we need to hang together. We need to coalesce. It's time. Thank you for joining me. I'm Scott Ryan.